in spreading the awareness about telemedicine. As you said, sir, telemedicine has been there for almost 15, 20 years, but nobody took notice about it. I would like to welcome all the participants of this webinar, and I would like to divide my in three parts. For the next first half an hour, we'll talk about telemedicine, the scope, the law, what it is really. Next 15, 20 minutes, I would like to dedicate to the questionnaire of the people, because there will be a lot of queries. I would welcome all the queries, in fact. And if you leave it in the form of a question as a text, or you can talk as well. And the next 10 minutes about the scope and the possibilities and what we are doing, and why it is something very innovative, which can transform the whole medical community. So as we know that providing healthcare for all in the difficult times of coronavirus, and we believe that indeed is going to stay in post coronavirus situations also. The studies have shown that people habits and likes and dislikes have changed recently during these difficult times, and now is the time to embrace the new normal. Why? Because if you see, on 4th of April 2020, there was a very big article in the front page of New York Times, which telemedicine arrived in UK, 10 years of change within 1 week. As I said, it has been there for long, but because of the recent change, pandemic, the adoption of the technology has been very fast. So what is telemedicine? Discuss about it, and we will, as we progress, we'll tell what are the possibilities about after that. So it's the delivery of healthcare services. We always deliver healthcare services, but not only the consultation bit, but diagnosis, treatment, prevention, research, evaluation, everything that is possible during for providing the healthcare from a very distance in a critical. That is the critical part about it. And how does it differentiate from a telehealth? It's also the part of the telemedicine. The only thing is, it's all about self-care, like dietitians will be part of the telehealth. Lifestyle modifications will be part of the telehealth, not the part of the telemedicine. Telemedicine is mostly, so who can practice this? Telemedicine is to be practiced by registered medical practitioners. Who are registered medical practitioners? Anybody who is on the state medical register or is a member of a Indian Medical Council register is able to provide and legally can provide the services online with the various platforms which we will be talking about as we go along. The changes have been so fast when I started preparing that it initially excluded the Ayush doctors, but the adoption is so fast in the legal frame because of the need of this time, it has been included as well. So why it is needed in the current times? What are the challenges we are facing in the current Indian healthcare system? We know that India is a vast country. 70% of the population lives in villages. They don't have resources to access the proper healthcare needs. The cost synergies don't provide. The doctors do not want to go there, probably because of the lack of the infrastructure services. The biggest thing is that you can't have a medical record. The people will come with the tell a story that they had this operation many years ago, but they can't document it, or there's nothing to do about. They don't have first of all, the worst thing was there was no legal protection for the patient or for the doctor. It was considered that if you provide any consultation, you might be charged for providing any legal advice to these media. So why this is the future? Because it enables everybody to access and afford the services of the healthcare. It reduces the time and give the people can access the services quite early, quite faster, and accesses that are not otherwise available. Like you don't expect a super specialist to go to a small town or tier 3 city, but they can be available because of the services possible. Why it is possible in the current scenario? Because we were always taught as a doctor that in the clinical examination, the whole patient examination includes examination, history taking, examination, auscultation, palpation, patient auscultation and investigations, and then the management. But if you see, 90% of the diagnosis is made on the history. Only 10% of the patients require physical examination. And most of the time, if you see, most of the time you will be able to make the differential diagnosis. That is the possibility, or that is the possibility, which can be supplemented by the diagnostic test, which is needed in about 60% of the people. And only 10% of the people really need some sort of intervention or the procedure to confirm the diagnosis or for the treatment purposes. So there are, because of the evolving time, because of the changes in the science, because of the excessive things, the clinical examination gadgets have changed. Now you can examine somebody's throat by a webcam and a bright light. You can just have a digital thermometer who can provide you the temperature. You can have a pulse oximeter. You can have a digital BP instrument. You don't need to be very learned to do a blood pressure examination. There are softwares and Bluetooth enabled stethoscope which can transmit the heart rate and the heart sounds to a long distances. There could be a pocket ultrasound scan with the healthcare provided in the periphery, which can be used. A pocket Doppler, which can be kept in a villages or a distant healthcare provider, which can be connected to a specialist in the cities, in the metros, and you can have a software support 12 lead ECGs. So these things which are essential for any examination can be done. I agree there are incidences like somebody who's got acute abdomen, you cannot touch and see, demonstrate the palpated. But if you ask, like when you are examining a child, you ask the child to cough, and if the child doesn't cough, if somebody has got peritonitis, they will be very still. You can watch the patient and then see what is happening. So if you see what has happened recently, there has been transformational change during the COVID period. The best part has been the legal developments during this period. When the pandemic started, on 11th of March, an old law was invoked. Invoked means was called upon. Because of the need of the time, they called upon the old law by all the states. Hello. Yeah. So basically on 25th of March, a new law on a new subject was passed by the Board of Governors, which superseded MCI, the Telemedicine Practice Guideline 2020. So they have been so quick. The telemedicine group, the advisory group, the society, they have been educating and demanding it for more than 10 years now. But obviously, because of the time and the need, that was within 2 weeks of invoking the law, it was made a law. And new, any can who is registered can practice, and who can practice, who cannot, what are the priests, that's what we are going to talk about in the next few slides. So on 11th of April 2020, the list of permitted drugs were modified. Earlier, there were very few drugs which were allowed, but depending upon the need of the time, they have even added some drugs which you can prescribe legally and safely from a very remotely located patient. On 22nd of April, I'm sure a lot of doctors heard about it, and then they rejoiced it, and MCI and the IMA got involved, where the ordinance was passed for the violence against doctors. Because you would have seen a lot of news coverage about people going for examination and testing the patients. They were involved in some violence, and obviously this was an epidemic disease amendment ordinance. So this is the bit which is different. The epidemic disease amendment ordinance. This is only for the epidemics. That's what they said. The IMA has been asking for it to be made in the law. Why is different this time? Because I'm sure everybody would have heard about a few back in Amritsar, Punjab. An FIR was filed against a pediatrician for asking fees for a teleconsultation. But thankfully, by then, a telemedicine practice guideline had already been published on 25th of April. It enables all the registered medical practitioners to provide healthcare using telemedicine, which means from distance and without even traveling. So what are the new telemedicine regulations by the government of India up to 31st of May? It's very important because the change is so swift that we might find that soon something might change in the next couple of days or weeks, because on 25th of March, only the IMA was considered, and only the allopathic doctors were allowed to do telemedicine and advise the patient distally. On 7th of April, 2 weeks of passing that, the CCIM, the Central Council of Indian Medicine, which is basically Ayurvedic Siddhanta Unani Practitioners Association, they provided telemedicine guidelines on the same lines, that provide telemedicine via distance. On 10th of April 2020, the CSEH, the Central Council of Homeopathy, published their telemedicine practice guidelines. So anybody and everybody can provide the telemedicine via distilling distancing. And that's a breakthrough thing which has happened recently within the last 1 month. So, and this is why it is important, because it's a new section which has been added to the IMC, the Indian Medical Council. These regulations may be called the IMC Amendment Regulations 2020. It means is the new law which is going to stay, and using telemedicine now legally is permissible for consultation, for prescription, for health education. Everything is legal, and we don't need to worry about prescribing or consulting doctors, patients from distance, from remote. Why this is not epidemic specific, and why it is going to stay? This is the main bit. People were worried that this might be changed when the epidemic finishes. We might go back to the old law where you cannot prescribe, you cannot write, you cannot advise, it will be illegal. But it is not the part of the Epidemic Disease Act 1987, which says in Section 4 that protection to persons acting under Act, no suit or other legal proceedings shall lie against any person for acting done in good faith, or the part of the Disease Management Act 2005, Section 63, which says no suit or prosecution or any proceedings in any court or against any person working on behalf of government or authority for any work done or intended to be done in good faith. So basically, if you see, this is something which is going to stay, which is something possible, and this is not going to go back. It's not part of the epidemic disease, because once the epidemic finishes, this is going to stay. It's not part of the disaster. So if there's a disaster, you can provide, and then sometimes you can wait, but that's not the case. This is going to stay for the times to come, unless and until some changes happen. So who can provide? The best thing about this is, in the current scenario, like if you are registered in Madhya Pradesh, you cannot and legally could not, basically before this act, provide teleconsultation to somebody staying in Delhi, or somebody staying in Mumbai, somebody staying in south of India, or somebody staying in Karnataka, in Kashmir, or in West Bengal. But now with this guideline, telemedicine, teleconsultation, prescribing patients and treating patients is legally permissible from any doctor on any part of India. That's the best thing which has come out of this. Second bit is, the only thing that every doctor has to respect is he has to maintain the same standards of care during this consultation as he would do for any patient when sitting face to face and providing consultation. You will not have deficiencies, you can have time, you can take your time. So basically you can be charged for negligence only and only if you would have done like a face-to-face consultation. The next bit is about the patients. What is the patient's duty? What to provide accurate? The patient's duty is to provide accurate information to the doctor. Why? Because if the patient is not able to provide a consultation, even though they have initiated and you are not happy with the history, or you are not satisfied, you can always discontinue, and you can still charge whatever fees you have already charged. So basically, it's the patient's duty to provide accurate information to the doctor. The whole onus of responsibility for this lies on the patients to provide accurate information for the doctor's benefit. So what are the current guidelines? Not complete. It's a current guideline. It's not a complete code. And as I said, the things are evolving. They are going to change, and they are evolving very fast. So we need to keep ourselves updated. That's why Alembic has taken the initiative to spread the word, to make it possible for all the stakeholders, on the caring side, on the carer side, to know about it. In earlier days, we used to have doctors and patients. Now, the telemedicine has described everybody as the beneficiary and the provider. The beneficiary can be a patient, can be a healthcare worker staying in the remote, or the provider, a doctor, can be staying in a city, in a metro, in a tier 1 city, in a capital city. So what are the modes in which you can provide this consultation? It can be in a video format, or an audio format, or a text phase. All and everything is allowed. So you can have a telemedicine facilities, apps, video chat platforms, or the audio over a phone, over a voice over internet, or an app which has got enabled to provide, or a text base. If somebody is texting you on a chat as a WhatsApp, it's all allowed. If somebody has got Google Hangout or a Facebook, whatever is allowed, these things are allowed to be, that can be done for the telemedicine. So what are the tools that you can have that can be provided? What is the video tools? Basically, telemedicine facilities, apps, videos, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, Skype, FaceTime, whatever you have, you can have a video consultations. Why the video consultations? Because I would request everybody to choose video and audio ones, because video consultations gives you more information, you can assess better, and prescribing certain medicines are restricted only for people who have had a video consultation. I will come to that bit where we will discuss about the drugs which are possible, which can be prescribed, which can be prescribed. So audio, as I said, there are a lot of apps we know about the audio facilities, and text. You can have a SMS facility by your phone also. That's also legally permissible, and it's legally binding. But I would request, if you have provided anybody with these consultations, you have to keep a record for your records. This is where our app that we are building will come in place, because as a doctor, you might not be able to keep the records of all your audio-based practices, of all your text-based suggestions or prescriptions that you have done. But legally, you are bound to keep this for at least next 7 years, which is not possible. You might change your phone. So it's better to use the apps or the platforms which provide you these kind of facilities to back up your data, your consultations, your prescriptions for future use. So telemedicine chat-based applications, specialized medicines and smartphone apps are going to be the norms of the future, I think. And that's where we will come in. That's where we will be heading towards. And general messaging, text chat platforms are fine, but obviously the big drawback will be that you might not be able to keep a record of all the prescriptions that you have provided, because your software might be corrupted, your computer might have broken. But as an app provider, as a platform, it is their responsibility, a legally binding thing, to have that backup for you, for your protection, and provide you that indemnity. So there are certain exclusions as well. What is not excluded? Included is the specifications for hardware and software. So there's no specific hardware or software that is needed. You can have a infrastructure building or maintenance that is needed. There's no data management system. These are excluded. So you don't need to do it yourself. You can do it for somebody else's. So somebody has got his mic on, I think. So yeah, use of digital, the certain things, as I said, which is excluded is any use of the technology. We know that being a surgeons, that invasive surgeries have been performed, robotic surgeries have been performed by sitting distantly. But this telemedicine guideline does not permit you to provide any surgical or invasive procedure remotely. That's the bit. Used for consultation, education, counseling. Cannot do any surgery or any, you can advise that you can go and get the surgery done. You can advise that you can go and this procedure done somewhere, but you cannot do it sitting remotely. The other aspects of telehealth, such as research, evaluation, and continuing education of the healthcare workers. So basically, this is not allowed. You can have it for the patient benefit, but not for the healthcare workers, and does not provide consultation for outside the jurisdiction of India. So this act is only and only, though you are allowed to practice sitting in Madhya Pradesh to south of India for a consultation, but you cannot provide consultations outside India. That the law does not allow you to provide consultation outside India. So now the next being the next thing, I think everybody will ask about the consent. Do I need to take a consent about the patient? Like most of us clinicians know, when a patient walks into your clinic, consent is implied that you can consent. So similarly, for anybody who, if the patient initiates the consultation, patient connects you to the app, can the patient emails you about a consultation, patient SMS you, or a patient starts his webcam to consultation, you are, that means he is giving, or he is giving consent to for a teleconsultation. And most consultations can be assumed to be implied, because if the patient has initiated, it is there. Then there are situations somebody else is asking for consultation. Like somebody might ask you, can I consult you about my mother? This is what quite often might happen, that somebody would ask you about consultation about their distant, remotely remoted parents. Or somebody might say that they are not in the same room, or they are not, you cannot take the computer to them, or they are not on the same floor. You can. So it's your responsibility to ascertain that the consultation is sought by. And the best thing is, it be left to the doctors, the clinicians' clinical judgment, and you have to make sure that you are satisfied. It's the law doesn't restrict you, but it's you who has to make sure that you yourself are satisfied and happy with the situation, that it is true. Other is the explicit consent. So now what is the explicit consent is that this is for people who are consulting on somebody else's behalf. Like somebody says that I cannot take consultation, they cannot connect to you. So what do? Ask them to take consultation and send you as an SMS, or you can have a signature, send you as an email. So that means you have to make sure that whatever they are doing, you are happy with it. You have to be happy and satisfied with their consultation. This is the place where you would request patient that since you are not the patient, can you kindly take a consent and email it to me, or take a consent and send a picture to me. So that way you have got a record that the patient himself is providing you the consent to take the consultation on his behalf by somebody else. So if somebody is it's always better to record all these communications, as I said, and it might be difficult for the doctor to get everything in one folder, because as I said, the record keeping is not going to be there. Do you have to have some sort of backup, some sort of system to make it possible for you to record and fall back on the record if needed at a later date, which is where we might come in. Now, what does the guideline says? And telemedicine should not be anonymous. That it is your responsibility to check that the patient has, you are happy with the ID of the patient. You can always ask for the patient's ID. You can ask, can you send me your Aadhaar card, a picture? You can always ask for because why I'm talking about all these things, because law is going to stay, because you will get cases for discussions, sab possible hai, and you can charge as well. So basically, it's your responsibility now that you can do the consultation while sitting in your drawing room, while sitting in your study, while relaxing on your dining chair. But you have to check the patient's ID. It's your responsibility. Similarly, the patient has got right to check the doctor's identity. So you have to have your ID as well in the form of your registration ID, because they are paying you. It is their right to check your identity, which you have to provide. You have to verify the age, address, email ID, whatever modes they say. Why? Because you have to give it to them, especially the age, because people might be contacting or consulting about a child. The mothers might call you, say that my son is having this fever, what to do. So the age becomes a factor. So that is where the explicit consent will come in. This is where you have to check the ID, because you have to check the age, because the dose for a, as a doctor, that the dose for a 5-year child cannot be the same as somebody you're prescribing to an adult. So you have to check the age, and because if you prescribe without verifying the age, and you write an adult dose, and the patient gives it to the child, it's your responsibility. You cannot give an adult dose to a child. So it's your responsibility to check the age, to check the ID, to check the address and everything for this thing. It's you, and it's all about your clinical judgment and clinical judgment. You are the best. You can do this in the best interest of the patients. The law does not restrict you, but the responsibility falls on you if you fail to not to check all these. For issuing prescription, one needs to explicitly ask and verify with the age, with who, and it's your responsibility. The telemedicine practice guideline clearly states about the RMPs. Begin consultation by informing patient about your name and qualifications. And as I said, on our app, we have got this performer. If you are registered with us, you get a pre-filled form where all these details will be available for you. So you don't have to fill in your name, your age, your details. It will be all filled in for you, but you have to provide all the proofs to us before that. So display number, you have to display your identity. You have to display your contact, because people might contact you on the phone for the first time. They might be quite happy with you. They might want to talk to you. So it's better to give them their where you can talk to them on a webcam. You have to provide them your email ID. You can keep the record of them, and they can contact you by email. It's for your advantage. It's for your safety that you provide all these informations from the very beginning. As far as the management is concerned, and that is your responsibility to make effort that you gather all sufficient data for the medical information, and you can provide a health education. Like you might get a patient who might need just counseling, patient who has got a psychiatric problem or have got mental health issues, the people who might come to you for counseling only. People might need some clinical, some education, who have had a previous consultation with somebody else, that the doctor has advised me that I should have this procedure done. Do I need to do it or not? So you need to have, they might come for counseling, like somebody has advised for the whether might have to explain the pros and cons of the procedure. You have to prescribe the medicines. So you can do education of the patient, you can do counseling of the patient, you can do prescribe the medicines, and for all this you can legally charge now, and you are because you are charging, you are liable to provide. I can see there are a lot of very senior doctors connected on this forum, and I know they would be very keen, because you can now prescribe. It's May, June time, you are hot, it's hot outside, you don't need to go out. It's the biggest advantage of this is that you can basically avoid getting infected yourself and seeing the patient infected and pass on the contamination. Why? Because I think this distancing is going to stay, and we might have to change. Like I've had some builder friends who have said that they are designing the houses differently now to include an area where people will have a home criteria. So similarly, the doctors need to learn to work from home, away from the patients legally, and that's the law is all about, and the guidance the guidelines is all about. So guidelines is very explicit, very elaborate and right and telling about the types of consultations you can do and the managements that you can do and the prescriptions that you can give. So you can have a first-time consultation for something very simple thing that I've got this sore throat. What to do? Like in COVID time, people will there's something called telemedicine triage as well. So you can do a triage of the patient. You can have a questionnaire the government has provided. You can have a questionnaire and guide them that you have got sore throat, you have got fever, but since you have not traveled outside, since you have got not lethargy, you are in safe, you have not gone out of your house, probably you don't have a coronavirus. So you can allay the anxieties and still you can be safe in recommending that. So there are certain strict guidelines about the follow-up consult. Consult. Any consultation done within 6 months is considered as a follow-up consultation. But whether you can charge for it is up to you. The law does not say that you cannot charge for a follow-up consultation for the next 6 months. But the law does say that any consultation or a repeat prescription can be done up to 6 months. And after 6 months, if you have to re-prescribe the same thing, you will have to have a face-to-face consultation. So it's not that you have never seen the patient all your life. So basically, if you have seen the patient beforehand and as a follow-up, they want to see you, it's allowed. It's legally allowed. Like as a surgeon, we know that I operate on patients who normally travel 12, like I've operated on a patient who's staying in Rima or Satna. They don't need to come to Bhopal for their stitch removal. They can safely contact me on phone. They can show me the wound and I can safely tell them legally that, the wound looks fine. You can get this is going to change the medical practice dramatically. We have to understand that this law is going to I was looking to some figures. Up till now, in 2020, the telemedicine market has been, when the people have been consulting and contacting, it has been only for $25 billion US. In the next 5 years, they are predicting by 2025, the medicine market will be worth $176 billion. So it is in the next 5 years, the telemedicine market is going to multiply by 6 times. So that is the scope you are looking at. So it's better that we jump onto the wagon, we accept this new technology, embrace it, and move forward. You cannot close your eyes to the emerging opportunities. You can provide a lot of education, counseling, and medication while sitting at your home. What does the law say, or these guidelines say about the emergency situations? I would recommend and request everybody to write down their questions, because they know this talk is going to be initiating a lot of queries in mind of people, and I would request you to ask me a lot of questions, because I find out more about it, because this is a new thing, this is a new law. We can probably recommend that the form a society on ourselves and educate and probably request the government to look at these queries of the patients to allay their anxieties and make it more possible to happen, make it more friendly for the patients, the beneficiaries, the provider, the doctor sitting at home. What does this law say about the emergency? So healthcare workers communicate urgently, supposing a healthcare worker communicates urgently regarding medical condition of a patient to an RMP, this is allowed. He can consult an RMP by sitting, but the RMP, once he identifies that there is an emergency, he has to necessitate an urgent, proper referral and probably advise him correctly. Like somebody is advising and somebody is telling that I have got chest pain, what shall I do? So you can say that you have got chest pain, and by the time you are young, I don't see that they have probably heart attack. But if you are suspecting heart attack, it's better not to ask the patient to get an ECG done. Why? Because if the patient is having a MI, you want the patient to be thrombolized at the same time. So it might be, if you advise somebody, no, you go to an hour-ago facility where you will be seen by a specialist, you will be getting an ECG done, and you will be thrombolized, you are doing everything in the best interest of the patient, because in your clinical judgment, in your professional opinion, the patient has got an MI. So you are advising correctly that you go for an hour long distance and get the ECG done and get a thrombolysis done at the same time. It might not be a good idea to go ask the patient to go to the next door doctor about 5 minutes ago, get an ECG done, because then that doctor will have to initiate another transfer to a different place. So we are wasting time. You know, supposing you see somebody consults you that with a broken leg, a deformity, and if you say no, this is doesn't look like a thing, something which which you should manage, it's better you go. So basically, there are a lot of things which it gives you. You can consult a person or at a distance, but you must advise the patient for a personal interaction with a registered medical practitioner at the earliest. That's what is very important. So emergency is allowed, provided you have advised correctly that you have to see the RMP at the earliest possible, and you initiate a correct advice what to do next in his interest, so that he gets the best practice possible, best outcome possible. Supposing you by somebody who has got a stroke, and if you're suspecting no, it's not TIA, it's a stroke, you have to advise that the patient has to be admitted in a unit where he can get a scan done, so that there's a bleeding, or it's because the treatment might be differing. Somebody has got a thrombus, or somebody has got a bleeding in the head. So what are the medicines which are legally allowed in prescribing? There is a lot of list: common medicines, antipyretics, cough medicines, supplements. They're all available. If you want, just email me, Atul, at the rate of bells.co.in. I think we have run more than half an hour into our talk. So I will try to be a bit faster, quicker. There's a lot of things that you can ask, but better that you ask. Take my email ID, Atul at bells.co.in, and you can ask for the list. This list is quite exhaustive, so I will be able to email you the list. I would repeat the email: ATUL Atul at BELS.co.in. So what are the prescriptions, the medicines that you can prescribe in the list A? This is the list. What are the beauty of this is that everything has been described very extensively, very nicely. What are the things that you can prescribe in the first consultation, and what are the things that you prescribe in the first follow-up consultation? And this is the list B for the follow-up medications, which you can add as an add-on. But as I said, it should be within the 6 months. There are certain restrictions, like we all know, depending upon the mode of consultations, like certain things are restricted. Like when we are prescribing anybody on when you face-to-face consultation, certain things are restricted on that as well. Similarly, there will be a lot of restrictions. There's a very beautiful chart which I have got, which I can share with you all about what the patient can consult as a first doctor with an RMP, which I can again share with you as a slide, as a projector. But if you want, you can take a picture of this slide. This is a very exhaustive list. I can share with you, and you can email me, or you can ask the Alembic people, the Abhijit or the team involved in this, because they are also part of the telemedicine scope and its possibility and spreading the awareness. You can ask the Alembic representatives. They might contact you for it. I can provide them the list of the medications that you can prescribe as a part of the telemedicine. I can provide them the very exhaustive charts. As I said, it's a very nicely done flow chart for the practitioners. So what are the things that can be done? And as I said, we are building a very nice platform called Bells. It's basically spelled as Bells, but it is BEL. Bells. Basically, it's not a wrong spelling of the bell. We all know that we got A for apple. Basically, it's a Bells with a single L, which I started off with a Bhopal endoscopy and laparoscopic surgery, but we are developing, going in television mode. So it's an Indian televenture which is revolutionizing the way the doctors interact, initiate diagnostic services, and provide and pharma dispensing and refer the patients as well. So it's going to be a one-stop shop for all the healthcare needs, for all the healthcare for anywhere in India and every time that you want. I would like a lot of people to join us, because you would want to be part of this revolution, which is going to unfold. It's going to be a big thing. Then the medicine practice of medicine is not going to be what we are seeing now. It's going to be tremendously different. And this is not the end of the story. This is just the beginning. As I said, the story has just begun. So be part of this, and we are going to be and we are going to make it all possible with your help. So as I said, I'm going to tell a bit briefly about the platform itself. In the meantime, while this is opening, if you have any queries, Tarika, if you have taken any queries, I'm happy to
Right,
answer.
right. So, I would request all the delegates, if they have any kind of question, they can use the chat box. So, we already have one question from Dr. Vishal Jain. He's writing that if patient is not being charged, please enlighten about the legal issues and the responsibilities.
Even if you don't charge, and if you are prescribing, if you have, as I said, there's no point in thinking that if you're not charging, you are protected. Because if you are advising, it's your good faith, might not charge, but still you have to do, you will be treated like you have charged, and you can't legally practice it, but something wrong happens, and the patient says, if you fall short as per the guidelines, you will have to face the consequences. So thinking that if I have not charged, you will not, it's not the case anymore. You can charge legally. Even if you don't charge, you are treated as if to charge, so it doesn't make any difference. So this is that app that I was talking about, Bells. It's going to be on your forms, everybody's phone. Any more questions? Or
Sir, not yet. We just few are
fine.
okay.
So what happens? This is the app that you have to download. Once you click on the app, it takes you to this chapter. You can either search for a doctor. If somebody wants to search a doctor, they can search a doctor. They can buy medicines. So basically, with this app, you can prescribe. As I said, they can buy as well, and you can even book diagnostic text. So they can prescribe, buy. So once they have done it, it takes you the page. This is the Bell's front page. They have to put in their mobile number. This is to check the identity of the patient, for that legally we are bound to. The next page will take you the way that the patient puts their phone number and submits it. They will get an OTP, because we need to check the patient's identity, and we need to, for legally also, for our records, the patient receives an OTP, he fills that OTP. Once he does that, he has to go to a city. Why? Because you want to identify, you are prescribing medicine for somebody very far, that's possible because of this app. So that way you can always prescribe medicine that is available locally, and refer the patient to the local diagnostic center. So if you see, suppose you click on the patient is Nagpur, you always go, this is the front page, the patient will see. There are options, as I said, the patient can choose doctor, the patient can choose medicines that he can buy, or even there is a platform where you will be, I missed that, where you can log in as a doctor also. This is what the patient see, this is what the doctors can see as well. So you can book a diagnostic test. So supposing the patient chooses that the doctor, he goes on, clicks on that, what kind of doctor he wants. Supposing the patient chooses he wants to see a dermatologist, he clicks on the dermatologist, and then goes and books an appointment with the dermatologist. So once the patient is there, he can click on this is the finds that, yeah, I'm happy with dermatologist. They can choose your time slot, so you're not technically bound to the timing. So this is the time slots he wants to book. He can do that, and then he can come back to the face if you want, you can book the diagnostic test for the patients as well. You can put on the click on the diagnostics. These are you can choose you want to put, and then click on the continue. You can, once you're happy, you can say continue button, and you can book the slot the patient wants to give samples to, and then click on the continue. Once that's there, the patient has to put the doctor details who is being referring, because we want to know the data of the doctors who is referred. This will be for your benefit as well, for the reasons you all know. So then the patient can go and then choose we will be offering some discounts initially to begin the app as well. So you can choose and then he goes back. As a doctor or as a patient, the patient can choose his own account. He can go and choose his account. So he can choose his account where the consultations will be displayed, his appointments will be displayed. He can choose my appointment. This is the choose bit. So there are a lot of things which will be inbuilt for the patients and for the doctors. This will be for the protection. Being a doctor, being a clinician, I know how to protect myself. So I would like my colleagues to be protected at the same time, at the same way, so that they don't feel that they have been left alone on their own. So it's a very nice app that we will be coming up with the consultation of you all. So I would recommend that and request that if you've got any queries, please ask put now.
Right, so there is one question in the chat box by Dr. Shraddha Agarwal. Can the patient schedule the time for a routine kind of consultation?
Yes, yes. That's as I said earlier, that the patients can initiate the timing. The protection for the doctors will be, supposing the patients want to consult in the night and the doctor doesn't want. So the doctor can choose the slot they want to choose. Like you have got a clinic timing. So the appointments or the consultation times will be only chosen as per the patients, as per the patient doctor's convenience, and the patient will not be able to book the appointment when the doctor doesn't want. So supposing a doctor wants to consult between 5 to 6, the appointment slot for that doctor will be open and the patient can be booked over time. And obviously we are keeping the time slot as 10 minutes for each consultation. And what we will be doing is, we will be, because at the moment what most of the consultation doctors feel that koi 10 minute kha gaya, koi 1 ghanta kha gaya, but you still charge the same. But here, if somebody needs more time, obviously the time, as the time progresses, their number of consultations go up. So we will be fixing, like for the first 10 minutes, the consultation time is the charge is maybe 100 rupees. But as it falls into another one, either the consultation will terminate, or he will be charged another one, so that the doctor gets more. So if somebody takes, because for the counseling session, people might take half an hour. For the health session, might 1 hour. So you don't want the doctor to feel cheated that they spend 1 hour with this patient, still they are not getting. So the time slots and will be devised in such a way that the patient does have right to, for the correct consultation, for the doctor gets his remuneration on the equally basis. And as I said, it's mostly for periphery as well. So we will be doing a lot of discounts, a lot of promotions. We do not want to feel, or the patient to feel disadvantaged as well. We want to do it in the good faith of the patient. We know we do a lot of charity. We do know without a lot of free consultation, we will be doing all that as well as a part of the initiative. Because at the end of the day, we are doing it for the patient's comfort as well. So we want to build a good rapport between the beneficiary and the provider. So we have to make sure that both are happy.
So one more question, sir. Dr. Ajay Jain, can Truecaller identification incorporated?
In this, I would rather, because people, what the Truecaller does, it identifies the name of the people have chosen, necessarily than people have put. So supposing somebody has put somebody's name or saved his name very differently, somebody has saved the number as wife's number, and somebody calls, the Truecaller will be identified as wife. So you can't have that many wives calling you, obviously. So basically, the Truecaller app, I mean, people who are using apps, Truecaller, they know that the Truecaller not necessarily identifies the name. The Truecaller identifies the name in which the name has been saved. So somebody has saved the name as wife. So that's what they will see. So which is not the correct way, I think.
One more question by Dr. Chandan Sharma. He asked that is there any planning to have remote skilled clinics or individual who can help the patients to get consulted? How telemedicine plans to reach to uneducated or non-tech civilization of the country?
That's a very good question whoever has asked, and I would that's what we are thinking of. That we will be probably this will be the next phase probably where we would like the local healthcare workers or people living in a remote areas to start a clinic where we can provide the infrastructure where they can do a good job with the consultation of a specialist sitting remotely. So supposing somebody is living in a far off place and because legally it's allowed, you are legally allowed to do a consultation sitting at a far off place. So the infrastructure can be built. We can provide the because of the facility. See, what I was thinking of that telling that, do you know that how many people in India have got mobile phone? 100 million. Sorry, 100 crores. 100 crore people of India have got mobile phones, and of them, 40% are smartphones. So if you see that way, 40 crore people in India alone can have facility of telemedicine. So this is the scope of the whole thing. So there's no, this is just the beginning. And you know that because of the so cheap data, the 3 GB data costs only 10 rupees, the cost you would pay to buy a cup of tea. So basically, a 3 GB data is enough to upload a full length, high definition movie. So for 3 hours. So basically, you can have a very good consultation for a month with a 3 GB data. So this is the scope I'm talking about. And the opportunities are tremendous, tremendous, tremendous. I would request a lot of people to jump on and join us. I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Tarika. Probably you.
So one more question, sir. There is by Dr. Sunil. He's saying that is there any difference between doctor calling patient or patient calling doctor?
Yes, there is difference because if the patient calls, that means it's a patient initiated consultation. So it's implied consult. It implies that means if the patient is calling you, you are protected. But if you are calling, you have to take the consent of the patient. Like this is called as explicit consent. Like when you are supposing when somebody walks into your clinic and puts his arm forward for putting an cannula, means it is implied that he wants an injection. But if you want to take somebody to an operating theater, you have explained, no, this is a procedure which you need in your interest, you need an operation because you have suggested this and you have suggested. That means this is explicit consent. The patient has to sign the consent form, know that I'm agreeing with what you have suggested and I'm accepting your treatment. Similarly, if you call, you need to take his consent in the form of a verbal consent. You can say, I'm calling you for this reason and you have to you had contacted me and I think this is in your best interest, but I need your consent before I can proceed further. So he has to imply. He can send you an SMS. Yes, I am happy for you to provide me a consultation. I'm sending you an SMS, sir. Can you provide me a consultation? So if you initiate, request a callback. If you initiate, request an email, an SMS. So this way it is an explicit consent.
Right. So one more question by Dr. Sharad Deshmukh. Is WhatsApp video consultation is legal?
Pardon, is WhatsApp?
Consultation legal?
Yes, it's illegal. I think the doctor missed my first part of the first part. WhatsApp consultation is legal, but you have to keep the records of every consultation you do for next 7 years because the patient can come after 2 years that you did not do this. So if you have lost your phone and the patient denies, you have no right or no defend yourself. So that's why I said it's better to get attached to a platforms to some there where you have got this legal protection, where you have got a backup of your data, what your consultations are done. But WhatsApp, Skype, Facebook, Twitter, everything is legally binding, acceptable, and you can provide legally. But you need to have it protected somewhere.
So one more question by Dr. Ajay Jain. Can a remotely based RMP assist us?
Yes, they can. This is where the explicit consent will be taken. I mean, I think Dr. Ajay Jain himself is a quite senior pediatrics. I have had this Dr. Ajay Jain. He's a pediatric surgeon. There's another Ajay Jain I know who works also. So I don't know which Ajay Jain is that, but an RMP can consult, but this will require an explicit consent and legally binding. But the patient has to give consent for it, and that's where I think it's possible. That's why I said the word healthcare workers. So healthcare workers can legally consult a remotely sitting registered medical practitioner, a specialist, advice, but they will need an explicit consent, and they need to record everything. And if in the best interest of the patient, the specialist says no, you need to bring the patient for an emergency, personal, day to day, it's better to do that way. And always at the end, you can request, I would like to see you in order to confirm. So, but you can terminate that way. So as we go along, we will be discussing a lot of things in order you can do in order to make it safer for both for yourself as for the patient as well.
So one more question by Dr. Vishal Jain. Teleconsultation can be reimbursed in Mediclaim or not?
No, at the moment, as I said, most of the consultations that the healthcare there's no, the law has not been made any clear. The telemedicine society is apparently trying to get a negotiation with them, because any consultation that you do, supposing you consult anybody and say that no, you need an operation. Supposing somebody comes with a tumor and says, shows a consultation, a CT scan, an MRI to a neurosurgeon, and he says that, yeah, this is a tumor, you need an operation. Now, whether that consultation can be used for getting a Mediclaim and getting initiating that procedure that for a tumor is not very clear. So because the health because the medicine guidelines have been accepted by the government, but it's, as I said, it's only new thing, 6 weeks old baby. So we need to not it's 10 weeks old baby. So we need to make sure that the health insurance companies are brought into this. They will come into this, but we are still not there yet. So at the moment, the answer is no.
That's all, doctor. Any more delegates would like to have the question? So one more question. What is the basic qualification for an individual to play a conveyor role? The skill to operate apparatus and the equipments like thermometer, BP, sugar checkup, etc.
What is the correct?
Sir, what is the basic qualification for an individual to play a conveyor role? The skill to operate apparatus and equipments like thermometer, BP, sugar check, etc.
As I said, I don't know how many people still have got their mercury thermometer at their homes. Not many would have it, or the check might broken. So most of the us have got digital thermometers. And similarly, the BP instruments are evolving as well. Most of the people, they are using digital, and they have already got a cough. So if somebody is not trained as a doctor, I would not suggest or recommend anybody to tell them that this is because what they are listening, that might not be correct. But at least if somebody has got a cuff around their arm, digital thermometer, that will be accepted. A lot of people have it at their homes who are hypertensive. They have got the glucometer. If that the battery is not dead, if the strip is not old, it does give a right reading. You have to rely on the patient. That's what I said. The patient has to. It is a two-way communication between the doctor and the patient. If the healthcare provider thinks that the beneficiary is providing the correct information, knows how to use it, there's no minimum thing, because as a what what the next thing I think will happen is that a lot of people will be in the periphery, in the remote areas, in the villages. They will be able to access the specialists in the cities by the gadgets that they have. All they have to do is a shine. Like if somebody has got a skin lesion, they can turn on a torch on their mobile and shine the lesion, and the person sitting in the cities can have a look at and suggest, no, no, this is sebaceous, no, this looks like a tumor, no, this is looks like a infection granuloma, so no, no, this looks like a, so there are a lot of things that can be diagnosed. You can diagnose conjunctivitis. They can look into the ears and horoscope. You know that there's a digital horoscope available on the phones, so you can put shine light and look into the eyes as well. So there are a lot of things, gadgets, which will be available in the periphery with the healthcare workers, which they will have to procure, and based on that they can access the specialists in the cities. But there's no minimum requirement. If the patient or the beneficiary or the distant located healthcare worker can access it, there's no minimum qualifications needed. It's a gadget at the end of the day.
Okay, doctor. That's all, sir. No more
Thank you very
questions.
much.
Yeah.
I would like to thank everybody for joining me, and I'm sure that everybody would have benefited. And do contact me on my email. If you have any queries, happy to answer. If you have got any queries, I'm happy to provide those slides and medication. And this is for, I want this to grow. I want the Alembic team to make it possible. They have been working day and hard to make it possible, and it's their initiative. And you can contact the Alembic team as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, doctor, for a very wonderful, informative session. I hope all the delegates must enjoyed and experienced something new out of this session. Now I would request our Mr. Emerson sir, Mr. Manjeet Singh, to pay the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Tarika. On the behalf of Alembic family, I take this privilege to spread out my heartfelt thanks and express my paramount gratitude to Dr. Atul Kumar Agarwal ji, as you have honored us by addressing all the respected delegates. Your expertise in addressing the different approach for the telemedicine was cherished by everyone. It was thoroughly very enlightening, very informative and interactive session. I very humbly thanks all the delegates who have participated in this meet. We team Alembic Gaston Division highly appreciate and acknowledge your valuable presence for the session. I would love to express my genuine thanks to our Alembic team member also, Mr. Abhijit Mishra ji, Zonal Sales Manager West Zone, our regional head Bhopal, our marketing head Mr. Ankit ji, and our coordinator Madam Tarika ji, SPM for Alembic Gaston Division, for making this event a mega success by their passionate, dedicated efforts. I would request to all the participants to pray God to make this earth free from the pandemic of COVID-19. Last but not the least, we team Alembic Gaston Division salute all the doctors as they are putting their efforts day and night in serving the society and the nation in the pandemic of COVID-19. Once again, I would like to thank from the depth of my heart. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening. Namaskar. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Manjeet sir. Tarika, I request you to please close the session. Yeah. Thank you very much, sir.